Hey, my friend. Hi. Thank you so much for tuning back into the URC space today. And if you're a returning fan of the show, I want to thank you for rejoining our conversation. It is your favorite podcaster, Mr. Nash. And today we are actually just call me Nash. Where did Mr. come from? I don't know where that came from. It's just Nash, y'all. And today we are going to be in the isolation space, unboxing the taboo topic of loneliness. So, what's up, lonely? Let's get right into it. So today we are going to be looking at loneliness and the impact of it from external influences, which then can lead to or exacerbate internal struggles. And when I was thinking about this topic that was originally supposed to be at the end of our season, that the Lord just kind of told me to move it up to the beginning, I just went to Google, of course, and just wanted to see kind of how is loneliness defined? And when I looked it up, first, it's a noun. So I just want to clarify if you thought it was an adjective or a verb. For my English gurus out there, it is indeed a noun. And it is sadness because one has no friends or company, and associated with feelings of depression, and other words or expressions that are connotated with it are having a lack of companions or friends, feeling abandonment, rejection, unhappiness, aloneness, remoteness, seclusion, desertedness. I know, like, can I stop now? Yeah, okay, I'm going to stop now. I'm not going to read all of them, but those are all of the things that are associated with loneliness, and we're going to be unboxing a number of those things today, and talking about mental health and going a little bit deeper, probably than I even anticipated for this episode. So I just hope you're sitting down and you're buckled up, you're girded up, because we're really going to dig into it. So I came across an article from Business Insider, and it was talking about loneliness. And I like how it was mentioning transient loneliness. And of course, any article or song or poem that I mention here on the show, any work of art that I mention here on the show, you will be able to find it in the Unboxed Goods portion of the show, which is essentially the show notes portion. And you can go ahead and click in there, and you can find just more information of how you can contact me. And then also you can read these articles and all of these excerpts for yourself. But this article from Business Insider, it said something just so profound about temporary or transient loneliness. And it was saying that the times when we really feel this kind of temporary loneliness or this transient loneliness that kind of comes and goes is when a loved one dies, a marriage or an important relationship ends, or we've been entered or thrust into a new school, a job, or a community. And this portion of the article just really, there were just so many profound statistics. And I'm pretty sure that with everything going on in our world right now, these statistics are probably even understated in some regards. But it said 1 out of 5 Americans feels chronically lonely. And for my international friends who are listening today, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I'm sure that in your country and respective countries that there is some remote association with that kind of statistic where you live and where you are planted. I think another thing that I wanted to throw in there in regards to, the things that they were talking about, transient loneliness, is just everything going on with this pandemic. This has really just been unprecedented for many of us in this lifetime. And it has caused a number of things to kind of arise up out of us and be seen by our friends and family. And just, the descriptions and the words can go on and on. But one thing that really hits home with me is this thing called social isolation fatigue. And I don't know if that's like a bona fide thing, or if that's something where psychologists and those who've got all these alphabets behind their names are researching and studying. But it's just a term that just came to me, social isolation fatigue, where, you are now in a position where you are getting a little bit, I would say, antsy with not being able to see, your really close friends and your family and all of those things. Now, I know that there are people who maybe you're listening and you're like, what are you talking about, Nash? I still see my friends. I still see my family. This, that, and the third. Hey, I'm not judging anything that you're doing or that you're engaging with. And I hope that you won't, look at me with the side eye, me saying that. I just know that everyone has different COVID comfortability level. And I know for me right now, just where things are in the state of the world, my COVID comfortability level is just to be not around folk in the street, but that's just me. And I know, when feeling that, I mean, like, so for myself, like I haven't really been around people, and you do feel like you're isolated, and you feel that there's not a lot of people who can really relate with what you're feeling with. And even how do you even begin a conversation with someone? And you're just like, hey, like I'm kind of struggling with social isolation fatigue right now. I think for me, I had to have that conversation with a number of my friends, and I'm so thankful that I have a network of people whom I can just be so candid and so open with. And we can just have conversations about these kind of things. And I'm definitely feeling like the engagement that I have with those who are in my tribe every day, I absolutely love. And they have definitely helped make the social isolation not really feel so socially isolating. So I don't want you to think that I'm over here getting ready to have another meltdown. It's like, it's so crazy. Like when you decide to talk about your life, people just assume that, oh my goodness, maybe you're just, you need to go in a psych ward. Like, no, I'm cool, y'all. Just chill. But there was a moment last year, I do remember, when I felt like a leper, and going back to kind of, not even knowing where to begin with having that conversation of expressing your feelings of loneliness and isolation. And it was right when and I'm not going to tell too much because, I am writing a book and I do want you to read the book. So I can't give it all away, but I will give you a little taste. All right. You sitting down? Okay. So this was right when I had got news that we were going to be able to get repatriated back to the United States from where I was. And by this point, I had been transferred from one ship to another ship, and I was off the coast of the Philippines in Manila. And while we were there on the ship, we were getting all of these communications from our government in the United States. And it was telling us that, there is the CDC is request. I don't know if it was a request or if it was a mandate. I think it was a mandate that we couldn't travel any public transportation to get back home. So we couldn't be on a commercial flight. We couldn't be in a commercial airport. We couldn't even use an Uber. We couldn't use a Greyhound. We couldn't get in a taxi, like no ride share. I mean, it's just rental car. I was just like, yo, this is a bit crazy, because now I'm feeling like I'm some kind of leper. I've done something and it made me feel, like no one knows what this feels like. Like I just feel so alone in this. Like I just feel so debilitated. Like why am I being treated like I'm some person with a disease, And that loneliness feeling, that was definitely something that I think that was transient. I think before that, I think kind of culminating, I was like, no one really understands what's going on. But when I was like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to get home and I can't, and even my own country is telling me that I'm not quote unquote allowed to use all of, and granted, I know, it was coming from a place of public health and all of that. And I'm not knocking public health and those who work in public health, but I'm just saying the emotional impact that, hearing such things had on me made me feel very, very lonely. And all of the shutdowns that we've been experiencing and seeing, I'm pretty sure all are tied into that too. And I remembered just before that, a couple months before that, that article from Business Insider was talking about when we're put into a new setting at work or school or a community. It was Christmas of 2019. And that was probably one of the loneliest times I've ever felt in my life. And of course, I was working on the ship, and my Christmas was spent I think I had to perform a wedding that day or that week, and I was I was just exhausted with tending to all of the celebrations related with those who were celebrating Hanukkah on board. And I was preparing to get transferred to another ship on the other part of the world. I was also cleaning up, kind of getting things organized from the ship being out of commission for some time. And so there was just a lot that I was going, and I just felt just over exacerbated and just burnt out. And I just remembered I was facing some professional discussions and dialogues that were not leaning in my favor, but I was trying to get them to lean in my favor. And someone had said something that it was on Christmas Eve, and they just said something to me, and it just completely just rocked my core. And like the first response I said was, I was like, and this is why people jump overboard. I don't want to give too much away because it's all detailed in the book. And no, I wasn't contemplating jumping overboard then, but it was just like, wow, like people just are so mean for no reason. And it was supposed to be Christmas, right? And Christmas, I think, is one of those times when there is this overshared and over understood notion that it's about family and it's about friends and it's about being jovial and being happy. And I don't think I've especially the years I spent working at sea, it never really got just like, oh, ho, ho, ho. Like I want to be just like all about Christmas, even though Mariah here in the studio, hey, Mariah, if you're listening today, I still got your book here and I'm reading along and it's really, really good. But Mariah Carey, she's like the queen of Christmas, like she had that big Apple TV special this past year, but not the previous year. And all her Christmas songs just kind of get you in the mood. And it was like Mariah couldn't even get me in the mood, but if she comes on the show, she will. Wink, wink. But anyway, I just felt so low, and I'm resonating with this article as it's talking about when you're in a work environment like that. And that was a new environment for me, and I was so ready to leave and so ready to get to Australia and get out of that whole Caribbean environment. And it just was really just. I just couldn't believe how in an environment where it said that we're family and we're supposed to be this, people can speak such harsh words and make someone feel so isolated and so lonely. And maybe you've had that same experience happen to you, and it may not have been around Christmas or the holidays, but just the timing wasn't right. There were just some other things going on in your world, and, maybe with your family, or maybe, maybe something happened with your car, and then something happened with your house. And then, you got to work, and then someone just said something just off the cuff, and it just kind of just sent you somewhere, just feeling like, man, no one just understands how to just have basic human compassion on people. But maybe we can change that. Let's change that narrative and be intentional about having basic human compassion on folks. And another, the other thing that it talked about in that article was, the loss of a loved one. And I also have someone here in the studio with me. Hey, Mandisa, how are you? I hope you're listening today. Her last album, Out of the Dark, was all about, her story related to her friend Keisha, her friend Keisha was pregnant with her son, and she was also battling breast cancer at the same time. And she forewent the treatments for the cancer that was aggressively attacking her to safely give birth to her child. And that was a decision that she made and decided to go with. And Mandisa had said that she prayed and prayed and prayed that God would heal her. And, she gave birth to her son. Her friend Keisha gave birth to her son. And she had about, I think, a year with her son before Keisha died. And Mandisa just like that just rocked her core, and it just drove her into a dark pit. And especially for those of us who are people of faith, when we stand in faith and we speak, words of faith and alignment to God from his word, it can be very, very debilitating and very discouraging and isolating when things just don't go the way I think we would want them to go. And things just kind of take a turn and go in a direction that we just didn't see coming. We didn't plan for it to come. Just all of that just rocks you. And I think it brings you to just a different place of kind of all of those feelings, and feeling like you don't have friends, feeling like you don't have companions, feeling like you don't have anyone who you could talk to. And when we feel lonely, we can find ourselves beginning to do things that don't always, serve the best interest for us in the long run. And there are just two things that come to mind that I know I've done in my previous life. previous life, as I'm puffing a fake cigar here in the studio, puff, puff, puff. My previous life, because I think today I've tapped into the intentional part of having community and really just having people involved in my life in areas and places that I previously did not. And that has been such the one of the saving graces and the keys to my success of what I've been seeing in the thriving portion of my days here now that I didn't see before. And if you're listening, my friend, I want to encourage you to be able to kind of merge yourself with someone who can help you get to that place as well. And we're going to double click on that in just a little bit. But the two things that that I wanted to say that we find ourselves doing, that I know that I've done, or I should say I found myself doing, I don't know, maybe you find yourself doing other things, but the one thing is, I said, rushing into some sort of companionship or situationship to feel unlonely. And that is probably one of the most dangerous things that we could do, but also a very real thing. I think that's just kind of like a low-hanging fruit for us to just reach into and grab. And it's hard when you are isolated and you feel alone and you just want to have someone to just kind of hold your hand, give you a hug, have a cup of tea with. I mean, I don't know, like just run, go hike, just to do something and have that companionship. And you can find yourself just jumping into something or kind of rushing into something without, I think, the sound judgment that maybe would have been there under unlonely circumstances or normal circumstances. And another thing is finding ourselves turning to other vices to kind of compensate for that emotion of loneliness. And I don't think that we can really turn to anything in this world that's really going to compensate for that vice. And those things can range from anything from gambling to overuse of the internet to watching too much TV, just getting lost in Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu or Disney Plus or any of, those kind of streaming services. Ooh, excuse me. I definitely just burped and I try not to do it in the microphone. And if you're wearing headphones right now, I am so sorry if that came out wrong. But anyway, going on to other things like pornography and alcohol and even food, binge eating. And I think, we've got to, I was talking about this and, with a few of my brothers, I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And we were saying how we have to be very careful as humans to not ever think that we've arrived. We are, I believe, in a position of constant evolution, constant evolving. And when I say evolving, I'm not talking about like going from a monkey into a man. I'm talking about being in one place or stage in your faith and then going to another step or stage in your faith, from being from faith to faith and from glory to glory. So, 5 years ago, I remember I was struggling with, overeating sugar, right? And just having just a natural propensity and proclivity to go straight to sugar. And every time that I ate, I needed to have sugar. Every time I woke up, I needed to have sugar. And now I'm in a place where I do still enjoy sugar, but I have placed a moderation on it. And if I was to have a conversation with someone who also struggles with sugar, I wouldn't harp so much on the fact that, hey, I'm not struggling with that anymore. I don't even think about a honey bun. I don't think about cinnamon buns. I don't think about cakes, pies, cookies, Patti LaBelle, sweet potato pie. No, I'm not going to sing. But, all of those things that are just so good that I know my body has an inclination for, I don't think harping on the successes with other people is going to be a benefit. And I think when we hear about vices that other people are struggling with, we need to put a very, very, very strong sense of godly humility in our interaction and in our exchange so that we can really meet that person where they are. Like, yeah, I don't have as much of a battle with sugar as I do now, but I did at one point. And I don't think that you should speak from a place that you're ever free from it, right? Because I have to, or I don't say ever free, but you have to be intentional about the decisions that I make, at least with sugar. So when it comes to something, and just because my thing was sugar, right? And let's just say you were telling me that you struggled with alcoholism or you struggle with gambling. well, I struggle with, listen, me and Lil Debbie, that's all my problem. I ain't got to worry about nothing. But man, you struggling with the bottle, man. I don't even know what to tell you, bro. Like, no, that's not the approach. If we shouldn't try to make someone feel more isolated or lonely, especially if they're sharing something as heavy as something like alcoholism or gambling that they're struggling with. And it can be any of those different vices that we talked about. But I think we just have to find ourselves in a place where we can just be humble enough to be, one, transparent, if we're willing to be. Being transparent is not for everybody, and sharing your story is not for everybody. And I don't think that we need to start making, public profiles of, I struggle with this and I struggle with that. And if you do too, like, give me a call. Let's talk about it. I don't know if that approach necessarily works for everyone or if that's going to be inviting for everyone. But I think the secret, really, at least what I have found to be successful in my life, and maybe you have found this as well, and if you haven't, I would like for you to consider it, is simply starting solid friendships with people. Meeting people in a place where your commonalities have brought you together. You both like riding horses, or you both enjoy taking, walks in nature, or you enjoy things like the beach, and you enjoy things like watching Rachel Ray, or, you want to have dance parties to, I don't know, whatever artist you're vibing with at the time. Mariah, of course, that's always you. Hey, Mandisa. Hey. Oh, and Brandy's here too. Hey, Brandy. That's who we vibe with here on the URC space. But, we start there, and then we go into, like, you made that for dinner. Oh, I like cooking with that too, and then we start kind of intermingling and interweaving our lives. And then I think it takes time to build into that place where you're now in a place where you believe you can have kind of full disclosure with someone and really meet them where they are. And I believe that everyone does not need to know everything about you. They don't need to know everything, but somebody does, at least one person. If you can just open up to one person, that's just going to make the load and the light of emotion that you're experiencing and you're feeling that much lighter and that much easier. I want to talk about social media for a minute, because it seems to be something that we've kind of been parked in, and just by default, I think, at least with how everything's going on in the world, we're just a little bit more online these days than we probably were a couple years ago. And so there was another article I read on Covenant Eyes, and it says this: according to a survey from Pew Internet, nearly 3/4 of online adults go online for no particular reason other than to pass the time or have fun. But how much is too much? I think Facebook, and really any social site, is endless babble and ranks up there with porn as an indulgence, says Lawrence Aldridge, an engineer with Texas Instruments. Those who sit cloistered in their homes and spend too much time connecting online are lonelier now than ever before, says Aldridge. The social implications of letting such sterile interaction dominate one's life are not fully known. Now, okay, I'm reading that and you're just like, but I'm stuck in the house. Like, what do you mean? Of course I'm going to be online. We're going to get there. The article goes on to say, this doesn't mean that social networking always leads to antisocial and isolationist behavior. Rather, we should be on guard about our quote unquote hyper networking tendencies. When does time online consume my mind in a way that it starts to hurt my face-to-face relationships? The real enemy is fantasy, the state of hypnotic fascination that monopolizes my time and prevents me from engaging in productive activity and real relationships, says Nate Lurkin, founder of the Samson Society. And almost any website can serve that purpose. So it's really hard. And I really think, okay, I got it. Here we go. This excerpt from the article is talking about mindless use of the internet and just kind of being in a trance, just scrolling, just to be scrolling. And, one thing that I try to do and really am intentional about, and if you're on social media, you might do this as well, is I schedule my time for social media. Like, it's like something on my calendar. And in that time frame, that's when I'm on there. And I found myself to just kind of be in and off of it really quickly. And I'll check my notifications. I'll respond to the notifications I have, messages that I have, and then I get off of it. And then that's it. And if I need to promote something or put something out there, I'll go ahead and I'll do that. But I'll schedule that for another time. And I think that has been something that has been really helpful for me, because I am guilty and have been guilty of mindless scrolling on the internet. And I don't think that is necessarily, the social media is a tool, right? And I think if we can use it in a way in which we are engaging in, like how it's talking about here, those real relationships and, productive activity, things like, engaging in house party calls and Zoom calls, which pretty much all of us are doing for work at this stage in the game, or WebEx or whatever, Google Meet, whatever, platform that you use. If we can use those platforms to engage in intentional, I think, community, and not the mindless roaming of what is or isn't true in someone else's highlight reel of their life, I think that is what's going to bring us back to the place where we can not really find our face-to-face relationships in danger of being, compromised, even in the midst of a primarily online used world that we live in ourselves driving into. And we are going to pause it right here, and we're going to get into it next week. We're going to be talking about a little bit more on the despair that we finding ourselves inclined to. And with that despair, I'm talking about feeling like so low and so blue that we are now engaged in suicide ideation or thoughts of taking our life. And I'm not saying that, I think people who have struggled or battled with suicide ideation, I don't think they really want to die. I don't think that they really want to kill themselves. I think that there is just something just overwhelmingly weighing down on them, and they simply just want that weight to be lifted. And we're going to unbox that a little bit. And I said this last week on the show, and I'm going to say it again. I want to encourage you to hold on to something that is not of this world so that you're never let down. There's a promise in Jeremiah 29:11, and it says this: "For I know the thoughts and plans I have for you, says the Lord, thoughts and plans for welfare and peace and not for evil, to give you hope in your final outcome." I want you to hold on to that as a promise. And if there is something that I've said today that you found just resonated with you, it kind of hit home, and you find yourself struggling, I want you to do something for me, please. I want to encourage you to call the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration National Helpline. The number is 1-800-662-4357. Again, that's 1-800-662-4357. And maybe you don't want a phone call. Maybe you don't feel like talking on the phone. I know I'm not really a phone talker. I don't mind talking on the phone, but I like if it's either got to be a video chat or a text. I really don't like kind of just talking on the phone. So if you're like that and you're a texter, you can also text a crisis text line by texting HOME, HOME, to 741-741. Again, that's texting HOME to 741-741, and that is the crisis text line. And maybe for my international friends who are listening today, you are like, well, I'm not in the US. Like, what does that do for me? Okay, I got a resource for you too. Don't worry, I got you covered. It's going to be the Helpline, TheHopeline.com. Thehelpline.com. And all of this information, all of these resources, they're going to be in the Unboxed Goods of the show today. Don't know where I got that brain freeze from. So next week, we will be getting more into the specifics of what suffering in silence can do and how we can get back into the light by using the Word of God and engaging in productive activity and real relationships. But until then, I want you to remember that you've got to keep unboxing your life, one blank space at a time, living undaunted, knowing you're unbreakable, and embracing the reality that you're simply a treasure that's unfinished. Because you've been redeemed, restored, and reclaimed. That's a fact. Life is always best lived outside the box. I want you to stay free. All right, my friend, I'll see you next week.